Shalom. Want to give all praises to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem Harakak and double honors to the elder apostles, great millstone, who rule and teach well, and honors and salutations to the men of the Lord doing the same. Okay, this lesson is going into the judgment on Esau. All right, beginning with Esau, the so-called white man, and the other nations, other heathen nations. Okay, for what they have done to the Israelites, the 12 tribes, God's chosen people, the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. All right. And I'm gonna just pretty much start in Zechariah. This is Zechariah chapter 1 and 14 and 15. Okay. And the scriptures tell you the Lord required that which is past. Before I get this one, let me get that. Bear with me, require. That should pop up. Here you go. This Ecclesiastes 3 and 15. That which have been is now, and that which is to be hath already been, and Yahweh require that which is past. Right. Which is going into reincarnation, regeneration. But the Lord does, you're not going to get away with nothing. Okay. That's the point of the bringing up the precept. You're not going to get away with nothing. All right. So, but Christianity has blinded you Israelites into thinking like, that the Heavenly Father forgives the so-called white man of, putting, you people in slavery. Okay? For putting us in slavery. And that's not so. That's one of the biggest lies ever taught, ever pushed by religion. And our people is destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Esau, the so-called white man, he weaponized religion use it as a weapon plus as a defense mechanism. Why you think they push, forgiveness and this and that, love, forgive, they tell you that, and then, but anything, any like the what you call them, any remembrance of slavery, okay, in these museums and things like that. All right, even your civil rights activists, they taking that shit out of school. They taking that shit down under the Trump administration. That show you how dumb. That show you how dumb so-called black people are. Blacks, Hispanics, Native American people are. They telling you forgive and forget, but they not forgiving and forgetting shit. Okay? It's ironic that no other race on this earth forgives and forgets. Okay? Especially the word forget. All right? Japan, they have their anniversary. And so on and so on. Everyone else keeps their anniversary when they got fucked over. All right? But ironically, they tell you to forgive and forget. Okay? Even Babylon the Great America, they keep in remembrance how they gained their independence, from Great Britain and whatnot. And all those American wars, shit, they remind you of it in school everywhere you go. That's heavily pushed. Okay? But they basically erasing the horrors and the history dealing with slavery of the Israelites, of you so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans. All right. So this, that's why you got, the younger generation. They don't even have a clue how bad slavery, and we're still in slavery captivity. All right, but I'm talking about chattel slavery. All right, they don't have a clue how bad it was. Because it's downplayed in this society. All right, and they tell you so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans to what? Forgive and forget. Okay? Which is deep, is deeper than that. It gets biblical too. So this Zechariah 1:14. So the angel that communed with me said unto me, Cry thou, saying, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts, I am jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with a great jealousy. And I am very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease, for I was but a little displeased, and they help forward the affliction. Yeah. So the Lord punished, his chosen people by bringing what? The heathen against us, beginning with Esau. All right. And scattering us through the four corners. God's chosen people were scattered through the four corners of the earth. All right. Mainly through slavery, captivity. All right. And the heathens reigned over us. And still to this day. All right. But the Lord is going to bring them down. Okay, that's the whole point of World War III. And I can go to that next, matter of fact. But I want to say something. For I was but a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction. Yeah. Esau, the so-called white man, and of course the Arabs too, and the other nations, they helped forward the affliction. They went overboard, especially Esau. It's 2026, and you still got, niggas getting hung on trees. So that's an example of what? Going overboard. Because you can see that the Lord is ending this captivity. This captivity, all right, being in spiritual Egypt, America, the Lord is bringing this place down and judging this place for what it did to his people. All right? Plain and simple. That's why ain't nothing getting better. So you black Christians, you look sad, pitiful. You praying, you praying for this economy, you praying for this system, and they poisoning you. They I can't say the word, but they jabbing you up. They pumping you with all type of poison and toxins so you can have bad health, and keep your ass on rotation with the, with these pharmaceutical drugs, keep you in and out the hospital. So and the list go on and on. It's systematically designed to keep you down. All right. And we already know, you do have the poor white people, all right, or you can say the middle class and poor class so-called white people, which are Edomites. They're suffering too under their own king. So their own king is oppressing them too. All right. And the scriptures goes into that. All right, let me see what I want. I could get Sirach, but let me get this one first. I think it's 29. Yeah. This Proverbs 29:2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked bear rule, the people mourn. So all life is mourning under the rulership and the dominion of Esau, the so-called white man. And the scriptures tell you Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning that followeth. 2 Ezra 6:9. All right. So there's no mistaking about it. And, we got more scriptures to prove, through the spirit that they're the wicked the Bible speaks of. They're fucking over the Israelites and continue to fuck over the Israelites. And, they're fucking over other nations too. Like Venezuela and Cuba in the near future. Okay? Because what? They rule the world. You know how bugged out you gotta be to say the so-called white man doesn't rule the world? Right now, this is a white man's world. That's why we don't do debates. We don't argue with niggas, because these niggas are bugged out, retarded. All right. So it says, I'm gonna get Ezekiel. This is Ezekiel 35. Start from the top. It says, moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir and prophesy against it. All right, Mount Seir represents the Edomites, Esau, Edom. All right, talking about the so-called white man. It says, and say unto it, thus saith the Lord Yahweh. And I want to say this. All right, you trying to see who that is pulling up, but you so-called blacks and Hispanics, Native Americans that's defending Esau, defending so-called white man and saying he's not Esau and they're not wicked, and they're not evil, whatever. History proves otherwise. Okay. They have a outstanding, history of what? Rape, rob, and murder. Outstanding. So you just got to be a plain sellout, to even defend them people. All right. And you jumping in front of that judgment that the Lord has for them. All right. Even Esau be shaking his head at you niggas. You niggas that defend them, they be shaking their head at you. Behind closed doors, they be like, damn, these niggas is sad. All right. But it says, and say unto it, thus saith the Lord power Yahweh, behold, O Mount Seir, I am against thee, and I will stretch out mine hand against thee, and I will make thee most desolate. I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate, and thou shalt know that I am the Lord Yahweh, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword, in the time of their calamity, and the time that their iniquity had an end. Therefore, as I live, saith the Lord, power Yahweh, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Saith thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. Okay? And it's ironic that, we on one thing we can all agree that, the Bible does predict the last days, the end times, which we're living in. A Christian would admit that much, like, yeah, it does. The Bible gives detail about what's going to happen in the last days, but what you think is going to skip, like it's not going to talk about the rulership and the dominion of the so-called white man. Okay. So we clearly in the last days are some Christians, I done heard Christians admit we're in the last days. Okay. So you think the Bible wouldn't talk about the so-called white man who are the Edomites in the last days? Like it's just gonna exclude them. They not in the Bible. Okay? Because another thing Christians do, they talk about like the Bible is not about ethnicity and lineage, or none of that matters. We all one, we're all the same. That's a fucking lie. Okay? Because when you go into the scriptures, all through the New Testament, because Christians, they basically only hold the New Testament as valid. They don't like the Apocrypha. They don't really like the Old Testament, and they got a bunch of excuses for the Old Testament. All right. So all through the New Testament, it clearly lets you know, shoot, the Lord is only going to be saving the Israelites, Jacob. Even concerning Jacob's trouble, the great tribulation. Like, damn, he only saving Israelites. What's going on? So who are the Israelites? That's the question. Okay? And Christians don't know prophecy. All right? And they sold out. That's the bottom line. They sold out. Because Christianity simply doesn't make sense. If you use their teachings and to study the Bible, it's never going to make sense. because they're lying to you. All right, they're being weaponized and used as a shield at the same time by Esau. All right, by Esau, the so-called white man. So it says, um, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, they're still hanging you niggas on trees, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end. Therefore, as I live, saith the Lord Yahweh, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Since thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. Okay? Thus will I make Mount Seir most desolate, and cut off from it him that passeth out and him that returneth. All right? And it's a people before it's a place. Okay? Because, of course, Esau going to try to make it seem like, oh, that already happened, or that's talking about, the land, and that's just the devil, bro. They don't know prophecy neither. Okay, they're the wicked. Let me see. I'm gonna speed up. What time? Okay. This Ezekiel 36 from the top. Also thou son of man, prophesy unto the mountains of Israel, and say, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh. And I'm washing clothes too. That's why I was saying I gotta speed up. Because the enemy have said against you, aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. Therefore prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord God, because they have made you desolate and swallowed you up on every side, that ye might be a possession unto the residue of the heathen, and ye are taken up in the lips of talkers, and are in infamy of the people. Therefore, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord Yahweh. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh to the mountains and to the hills, to the rivers and to the valleys, and to the desolate wastes, and to the cities that are forsaken, which became a prey and derision to the residue of the heathen that are round about. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen, against all Idumea, which have appointed my land into their possession, with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds to cast it off for a prey. Okay? So they control the Holy Land. Idumea controlled the Holy Land. Okay? They're in it. All right? And you have other races, other heathen Gentiles in the land too. So Esau doesn't even control all of Israel right now. Ironic. Okay? Because they're not the people. So it says, prophesy therefore concerning the land of Israel, saying to the mountains and to the hills and to the rivers and to the valleys, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I have spoken in my jealousy and in my fury, because ye have borne the shame of the heathen. Right. And this is a result of the Israelites, breaking that covenant, with Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shah. Therefore, the Lord brought our enemies upon us as punishment. But now the Lord is about to take us out of captivity. All right? Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, I have lifted up mine hand. Surely the heathen that are round about you, they shall bear their shame. Right? Yeah, so you're going to reap what you sow. You're not just going to rape, rob, and murder and pillage, and get no judgment. The Lord is going to judge Esau, Idumea, so-called white man, okay, and the other nations as well. And in fact, the Lord is going to use World War III to do it. That's how powerful, Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shah is. The Lord is making them destroy each other. Joel 3:1. It says, for behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, World War III, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. All right. And World War III is also known as the Battle of Armageddon. Okay. That's pretty much it. I made the point. Okay. Micah Micah 2:2. And they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away, so they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, against this family do I devise an evil, from which ye shall not remove your necks, neither shall ye go haughtily, for this time is evil. Yeah, that's why the Lord is plaguing the shit out of Babylon the Great America for all of her sins. Okay? And it's gonna continue to get worse. All right, so Lord willing, that was edifying. I want to end it and give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Arakakadash. Double honors to the old apostles, great millstone, willing to teach well, and honors and salutations to the men of the Lord, doing the same, teaching the same. Shalom.